thank you so much for coming on the show and being here.
My pleasure.
If you could give me some background, because you didn't really even start in neuroscience. Like you have kind of a traditional, you worked in advertising, right?
I did. At first, I worked for a TV show. And so I think that production element of things has always been of interest to me. Being behind a camera and telling a story has always been fascinating way for me to express what needs to be expressed, but also express my own creativity. And so to go from television production to the advertising world, where you're utilizing so many different forms to tell a story, whether it's a brand story or a testimonial story, and then to end up in the nonprofit sector was, an interesting career path, but fun nonetheless.
Yeah. Why storytelling for you? What was it about? Like when you were young, were you a creative person, or did you like love the art of storytelling, or is it something that just came naturally?
No, I think I love writing. And so originally I thought I wanted to be a physician, a pediatrician, actually. So when I was in high school, I was, I'm going to become a pediatrician. And we had an internship as seniors. So I followed around my own pediatrician. However, organic chemistry did what organic chemistry is supposed to do when I got to college, which was weeded me out of that sort of side of what I thought I wanted to be. And I really fell in love with writing. And so I started then, doing different internships with magazines in the Nashville area to explore writing. And then the summer between my junior and senior year of college, I lived and worked in New York for Condé Nast Publications, which is, the mecca of the magazine world.
Mm-hmm.
And writing was always something that was fascinating to me, to be able to tell a story in a concise, clear, and creative way to compel someone to either learn more or act. That's sort of why I liked it. But I found out in New York that you don't make a whole lot of money working for a magazine as a writer at first. And so I applied to a position at America's Most Wanted. And they initially hired me at first to write for their website. Back then, it was 2004. Everybody was just launching a .com space to accompany whatever business it was that they had. And so for America's Most Wanted, it was, writing the story of the cases, putting it online, encouraging people to act on it, to find the fugitive or the missing child. And I loved it. It was a way to express my creativity, but also I loved news and crime and following those things and digging for information and getting a little bit behind the scenes of the investigation was fun. And they quickly lost production staff shortly after I got there. And so I moved over to sort of doing both website and TV production.
Man, fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, so writing is what really carries you into storytelling.
Yeah.
And then, you end up starting, or you end up on the film production side of it.
Yeah.
And writing, I mean, it's so cool because writing is really like the birth of any kind of story, whatever it is. We're always putting it on paper first, maybe because it's the process of thinking in a way. So after America's Most Wanted, where do you go from there?
After America's Most Wanted, I moved to Dallas and I started working at the Richards Group, and I was an account service executive, and I started in their digital business, which at the time was called Click Here. I enjoyed it and learned a lot about digital marketing, but I think I was missing sort of the good piece of business. So at America's Most Wanted, though we were working for Fox and it was a for-profit entity, we were still finding justice and finding missing kids, and there was a benevolent side of that, like doing better for the world. And so I approached my boss and said, I need something. And they gave me a nonprofit account, which was sort of dipping my toe into the nonprofit world. And I changed over to the PR side about a year and a half into my work at the Richards Group. And again, requested a nonprofit account, and they gave me the Center for Brain Health. And I just became fascinated by the brain and what was going on in that time period. And there was so much, and there still is so much news and exploration and development in the brain science world. And one of my first assignments working for the Center for Brain Health was with veterans. And so I moved over there full time and spent about 8 years there, and really came to know clearly more about the brain and research, but also how it's impacted military service members. And so through that work is how I ended up at Boot Campaign.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Mhm.
And it's cool that your path kind of follows this trajectory where you are following the meaningful story every time. It's just kind of like wherever you can unravel and discover that is kind of where you want to be, it seems like.
I'd never thought about it like that, but yeah, I think that's accurate. I think it's something of it's wanting to tell stories for people who can't necessarily tell their own story.
Hmm.
And that could be for a variety of different ways, right? Like they can't tell their own story because they don't have the means, meaning understanding of themselves or knowledge, or they can't tell their own story because they feel inhibited by something or someone, or they can't tell their own story, in the case of America's Most Wanted, because they're a crime victim and they may not be alive anymore. And I think with the veteran space, it was more of they can't tell their own story because it's still unfolding and we're experiencing a lot of pain. And so how can we help them uncover that pain to tell this more beautiful, becoming of who they want to be in the future?
Having been a part of the testimonial side of that, I think it's kind of amazing what Boot Campaign is able to do, the wraparound approach that you have. So, like, once you hear the person's story, once you bring them into the fold and into the Boot Campaign family and really kind of wrap around that holistic approach, I'm just curious, what did Boot Campaign look like day one when you show up versus what it looks like now?
We're in our 16th year of existence. And when the organization first started in 2009, it really was a simple premise: put combat boots on as many people as possible to show gratitude for those who served. That was it. That's all they wanted to do, the founders. And as we've grown, it's really evolved to address the most pressing need of the veteran and military community. And in 2012, I think, 2011 maybe, I met Morgan Luttrell through my work at Center for Brain Health. And he had experienced his own traumatic brain injury. And he, being in the SEAL teams, was sent all over the country to rehab to get back to fighting form so he could then be deployable again.
Hmm.
And part of that was coming through our work at the Center for Brain Health. When he left us that week, he said, when I get out of the SEAL teams, I'm going to become a cognitive neuroscientist. I'm going to come back here. When you put an obstacle in front of him, he's going to overcome it and do what he says he's going to do. And so, sure enough, about 6 months later, he's emailing from Afghanistan. Here's my application for grad school. I'm going to come back. So he did. He came back to the University of Texas at Dallas. He got his master's in cognitive neuroscience. And he sort of had this side hustle of trying to get as many veterans that he served with who were struggling to all of the care places that he was afforded the opportunity to attend when he was recovering.
Hmm.
And it became very cumbersome for him because there were so many people reaching out for help. So he walked into my office one day and he's like, gosh, I mean, what do I do? Because all of these guys and girls are reaching out to me and I can't do it. Like, this is a full-time job. And we were sort of batting around some ideas and brainstorming. And I said, hey, why don't you approach Boot Campaign? Like, I bet that they would be interested. And so in 2016, Boot Campaign adopted Morgan's brainchild of a health and wellness program. At the time, it was to address what he referred to as the big five. And those are still the biggest issues that we address through our health and wellness program today, which are brain injury, post-traumatic stress, chronic pain, self-medication, and insomnia. And so we feel like those are the major issues that veterans are facing as they try to transition from the military to the civilian sector. And so for him, it was really an opportunity to put a framework around what he was already experiencing. And several months later, Morgan comes back into my office and he's like, hey, I was like, yes. And he said, I think you need to leave here and you need to go work for Boot Campaign. And so I spoke to another mentor of mine and he said, you should go for it. Like, why not go for it?
Hmm.
And so I submitted my resume to Boot Campaign and just kind of like rolled with the punches, which is not really how I operate as a human. And got the job offer and joined the organization in May of 2017. And so at that time, the health and wellness program was new. And then, having been here for a few months, I quickly sort of surmised that you had to, one, tailor the approach and have somebody on staff clinically that could really help determine what these veterans need. And so I reached out to Jenny Howland, who I worked with at Center for Brain Health, and brought her on board. And since then, the organization has grown in terms of the numbers of veterans that we are serving, but also put a lot more structure in place to make sure that we're doing the most individualized approach for the most people with the best quality care. Because we certainly don't want it to become a cookie cutter approach at all.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. It's cool that it was, basically you and Morgan just kind of collaborating on this idea of how do you build infrastructure around this kind of need. So obviously there's a huge need, especially in the veterans community, and you essentially, yeah, kind of just connected the dots. And I think the impact of that is so interesting because of the strategy. I mean, I guess it sounds like Morgan was able to experience a whole person approach at some point, which he realized really kind of changed his own personal trajectory. So it's cool that, you were able to connect those dots, and then Boot Campaign was able to kind of put them together and really make a full whole person situation happen, which obviously has been very impactful as we tell those testimonials. For you, what did you come into Boot Campaign as? What was your title like day one?
CEO.
Oh, okay, so you came in as
Mhm.
the leader.
Yep.
I see. And what was that transition like, going from brain health to Boot Campaign, now being CEO of a nonprofit and having kind of worked in a nonprofit before?
I think one of the biggest things that I struggled with personally, which one of my mentors was like, you can do this, was that I wasn't equipped to be a CEO, right? I had been in the nonprofit space, but I wasn't ever the one responsible for the overarching one strategy, but then two financial element of how you raise money, how you steward those funds well,
Hmm.
how you make sure that year over year you're growing to be able to provide the care that you needed to provide. And so for me, that was a little bit of an insecurity of like, do I have the skills, knowledge, and ability to do this? And the beauty of Boot Campaign is the team approach, is that everyone contributes in a meaningful way to make sure that we're reaching the goals that we set out to reach.
And then as a leader, do you feel like you started to learn some things about yourself once you've started to find your groove and all that? Like, just personally for you, did you see any growth change in yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we're always learning, right? I think if you're not constantly evolving and constantly pushing yourself to learn more, I don't know, it's kind of a boring way to live, but it also helps you improve and become better, become a better leader, become a better wife, become a better friend, all of those things, because there's nothing as a human that you do in complete isolation,
Hmm.
right? Everything is interrelated, which is similar to how we approach our care at Boot Campaign. Like, we're not just tackling one piece of the puzzle because that one piece of the puzzle affects the 15 other pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, all those things are connected. And then if you could just kind of describe that approach. So when we think about those big five that you're kind of targeting, what are the tool sets that you use to kind of target those big things?
It depends on the person. Our approach is to look at the individual veteran one on one, and what is it that their brain and their body is telling us? What are the symptomatic expression of those issues? What are other contributing factors, right? What's their family life like? We don't address finances directly, but we have other organizations that we work with that do. And so, how can we provide that supporting element for those aspects of things? But we really are taking a specific approach to make sure that the veterans know they're not coming to Boot Campaign for one thing. We're going to look at them holistically. We're going to take everything into account. Their case manager is going to know every aspect of care that's needed for them. And things may change, right? They may start their program with us, be 3 or 4 months into it, and a life event happens, and we need to adjust. And I think that's one of the greatest qualities of Boot Campaign too, is not only the individualized approach, but also the flexibility of care
Hmm.
to make sure we're meeting veterans where they are.
And I think that's something that, at least from the outside, I would say it's unique. It's not something that a lot of other organizations do, and it's definitely not something that the VA classically does. It's obviously a full wraparound infrastructure strategic approach to treating a veteran.
I think by design, we want to stay that way.
Mm.
I think people do share that with us, mainly the veterans who were serving. And the reason for that is because we take such an individualized approach that's really time intensive,
Mm.
hand selected, quality care. And so we want to make sure that that is sustained throughout the duration of a veteran's work with us. Because if a veteran needed care and they didn't care what that care was, or it was just to treat the symptoms, there's a lot of places that do that. Our traditional medical infrastructure looks at the symptoms. And what makes Boot Campaign different is that we're trying to get the root cause of those symptoms so that we're treating them, addressing them, uncovering the issue, and finding a way ahead that's going to make them not experience those symptomatic expressions anymore.
And obviously very effective. I mean, having interviewed different veterans who come through, those experiences, I mean, obviously life-changing to talk to people like that. It's obviously a very emotional experience every time. But when you see them discuss the person that they were coming into Boot Campaign versus when they're graduating the program, it's like two different people. I mean, it's just like seeing two different people completely. And sometimes they tell you that it wasn't just the experience being in the service, it was things prior to that, So that root cause aspect of what you do is really obviously very effective. And when you think about the story aspect of it, because it's interesting that you've carried story with you, and as someone who worked for you at the Center for Brain Health and now at Boot Campaign,
Worked for me.
I mean, for
strong
you,
word.
alongside you, I feel like I learned a lot about story, from you, and I think you have a skill, and to me, seemingly like a natural talent of being able to just identify the important things and follow the through line. So when you think about story now, back then it was America's Most Wanted, it was how to put this brand forward, it was telling stories at the Center for Brain Health, but now it's telling veteran stories, which are usually very deep, very hard stories to tell, sometimes hard to extract. What do you find are the most effective tools for you in continuing to extract the right story and really tell the right story for Boot Campaign?
I think listening is probably the most important thing,
Mm.
and giving space for people to share their own experience. I think something that's really important to us as an organization is not to try and direct a particular story, and letting that story unfold naturally and just sort of being a bystander and curator of that story so it comes across effectively and efficiently, but not driving that, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
For the veterans that we're working with, I think they truly feel relief and want to give back in a way. And they can do that by sharing their stories. And honestly, I think it's a form of therapy for them too, to be able to express who they were prior to receiving care from Boot Campaign and who they are now is a huge piece, especially to do that publicly, for them to experience closure in one element of their life, but also to show the becoming of who they want to be.
Storytelling being this through line, I think is just so fascinating to me because storytelling is one of those things that I think is just so powerful because number one, we share stories with each other. Our lives are in a way like a story that you're just sort of living out in real time. And then the narrative that you tell yourself in your own head, right? Because of the people you interact with on a daily basis or the things you learn throughout life. So narrative is just such a part of the human experience. So I just think it's a fascinating through line that your creative path has always involved extracting a narrative of some kind and finding the true sort of deeper meaning of it, whether it's with veterans, whether it's with the brain, whether it was on America's Most Wanted. And and for you, when you think about storytelling objectively, why do you feel like it is such a part of the human experience? Like why is it that we're so wired to give and receive stories?
It's a really deep question, Roger. At its most basic, right? If you think about when you first learned a story, right? When you first heard a story, you were probably a kid, and it was probably a way to escape to a different place
Hmm.
or a way to experience a different place, whether somebody's telling you a bedtime story or whatnot. So to me, it's a way, there's many different reasons why we're built to give and receive stories, but I think at its most basic form, it is a way to be transported somewhere else. Now, why you're being transported there, there's probably a whole bunch of psychological things, right? Is it to escape? Is it to experience something new? Is it to try and be somewhere where you currently are not, right?
Hmm.
I think it's also a way for people to have a collective experience, right? If I'm telling you a story and you've never been to Greece, but I've been to Greece and I'm telling you about that, sort of makes you part of the experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of reasons.
Yeah, yeah, that sort of sharing in the experience. That's interesting. And then the other thing that seems to be true of you that maybe I never realized, you must be immensely curious. Like you must be like
Mm.
curious person, because it seems like you're always kind of like your experience at the Richards Group, for example. You know, there you kind of did some brand stuff. You working as account manager, and then you're like, I need something.
Oh,
I
yeah.
need something more stimulating here. Like,
Yeah.
what do you got? And it ended up being these, like, working at the Center for Brain Health, and you end up there, and you have this. You're fascinated by these vet stories, but also like chasing down and pulling the thread of
Mm.
how do we build the infrastructure properly. Even at Boot Campaign, how do we individualize it? Just continuing to pull that thread and ask the next question. Ask the next question.
Mhm.
Where does that come from? Is that something that you've always done? Like, do you feel like you've always been a kind of curious person, always kind of like, okay, what's the next step in this story? Or is that something that
Mhm.
you feel like just comes organically?
I don't know if curious would be how I would describe myself. I definitely like to get to the bottom of issues. I think I've always been fascinated, which is interesting to start my career at America's Most Wanted, is that I've always been fascinated by like investigation
Hmm.
and uncovering a clue. And that element of things has always been interesting to me, right? I used to read all of the crime books growing up, and I loved watching Unsolved Mysteries and, The First 48 and any experience or game where you could try to figure out the end result and you had to kind of like be on this hunt. That's always been interesting to me.
Hmm.
So I think, investigating has been something that's been consistent in my background. My friends kind of have this nickname for me, Sherlock Holmes. Um, so to me, I think it's the investigative side of things that's interesting. I love uncovering um, the heart of the matter.
It's almost like journalistic in a way.
Yeah, definitely. Hmm.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Something I didn't know about you. Yeah, but I kind of love this nickname.
Yeah, I mean, like when I met my husband, I did a little deep dive onto who he was, right? It's like trying to figure out about more about people.
When you think about the investigative quality of not only yourself, but clearly everyone else on the staff at Boot Campaign, your partners, all that stuff, what impact does it have for Boot Campaign as an organization?
I think most importantly on the veterans that we serve, like not having an answer isn't good enough. And I think this is part of why Morgan wanted to start the health and wellness program is if you look good on paper, right? You've taken all the assessments and all the psychological tests and on paper, you look within normal limits, but your experience in real life is not that, then we haven't done enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not sufficient. We have to go digging deeper as to why are you still feeling like you're not yourself or you're still feeling like something's wrong if everything else is showing that's normal.
Getting to the bottom of it and getting an answer, especially when it comes to healthcare, medical care, wellness, all those things. Because when I think about healthcare and wellness, I mean, the whole world of that kind of stuff is just exploding all the time. And if you spend any time on social media,
No.
not only are there a million people telling you this is how you should do it, this is what you've been doing wrong, this is the thing that you need to focus on, there's also the feeling of I'm never doing enough. I'm constantly falling short of the goal that I should be aiming at.
It's most important for us as an organization that we're continuing to evolve, because the health and wellness space is constantly evolving.
Hmm.
It's making sure that we're rooted in science, but at the same time, we have to be exploratory in nature because there's not one size fits all. Nothing is going to work. I mean, aside from eating right and moving your body that all of us need and sleeping well,
Yeah.
there's not an intervention that's going to be sufficient for every ailment that's out there. I think there's a delicate balance between continuing to investigate and how much time, effort, and energy we put towards that versus the continuum of care that we need to execute on a daily basis.
Yeah, and that exploration and investigation piece, I think that's so fascinating. So when you think about your own path with creativity and creative thinking, how has creativity impacted you personally? Like just being able to step back and think creatively about things.
Well, I agree with you that most people think creativity is sort of only in the arts, right? It's music, it's film, it's theater, it's dance, it's painting, it's an artistic expression, whereas it can be in any form and just how you put your energy towards it. I think for me, you have to give yourself the time and space to be creative. And I think that's something that we don't do often enough. And sort of having boredom is okay. Not having your phone all the time is okay. To allow your brain to wander and daydream and have some sort of creative outlet. And what that outlet is could be a whole bunch of different things, right? For me, still writing is a huge piece of what I love to do. I think I'm most clear in my communication when I've written something down. And so I love writing. I love writing both personally but also professionally for Boot Campaign, whether it be a blog or an email or something like that. But then also being able to think about, clearing out the clutter, both physically within your physical space that you're in, but then also mentally, so your brain can put together these new ideas and new information in a creative way.
Yeah, love that.
But I think this right that you're doing is like a whole creative expression, and you continuing to push the envelope to delve deeper into these subjects. Because I feel like most of what, from a client-based perspective, most of what you're doing now is not long art forms, right? Like they're trying to be succinct, and because our average attention span is next to nothing since we're all walking around with a phone.
Yeah.
But because you're naturally curious, you're wanting to dive deeper. So this is your avenue to do that.
Yeah, this is definitely an avenue to do that. And this, I think maybe a couple years ago or a few years ago, or honestly, after doing testimonials for Boot Campaign, after recording and asking, these vets about their stories, I think I started to just really realize that documentary conversations, that's really where I feel like the majority of great story, interesting things, learnings, experiences, that's where they come from, is just interacting. So I think this is an avenue, for really just to have conversations with people that I find interesting. And I mean, I love it because I get to sit down and talk with people, that are amazing and that I find really great. How people receive the thing is usually less of my concern, because that is really, well, let's just organically let it go out there and do what it's going to do. Part of it is like the making of it.
Yeah.
That's like the fun part. Like this is the meat of it, right? Like this is the experience of it. Once they cut this episode together and put it out in the world, it'll go do its thing, and I hope people watch it, and I hope people honestly find Boot Campaign and get involved. But yeah, once it's out there, I'm kind of like,
whatever, you're releasing it.
Yeah.
It would be interesting though, now that we're sitting here, I'm like, our typical testimonial, right, is a subject in front of a camera sharing their story, and you don't see the conversational element of things. But it would be interesting to do a Boot Campaign testimonial like this in a conversational setting. I wonder if we would get more, right? Because somebody else is sharing the space with them. versus just being the one totally in focus.
The sharing of the space, I guess I never really thought about that from an experiential perspective, like being in the space together, being in front of the camera together changes the dynamic of how much you're willing to open up. I never, I guess, really thought about it that way. That's interesting.
It's much harder for me to be in front of the camera solo, you know, trying to answer questions and compel something or someone, because there's no one really I'm talking to, right? Like, you're
Yeah.
talking to the person who's interviewing you, but at the same time, it's being captured on film to create something else. Whereas this is an interaction, an exchange of energy between two people.
Yeah. This brings up something that I find on a regular basis, especially in our industry, that I know you'll be able to attest to as well. Because what you're saying, the experience of being in front of the camera versus behind it, and then, of course, it's the reason that I keep interviews in a completely conversational manner, is because number one, I don't want to be inauthentically trying to extract something from the person being interviewed. And then also, when you're positioned that way, not necessarily physically in the space, but when it's not conversational and all you're doing is bullet pointing questions at them, then they get, I think, what you're talking about, which is you feel like you're the one who has to bear the burden of compelling the audience and saying it just right, hitting the note just right. And I like to remove the fear of that and the weight of that burden, because that's really what editing's for anyways. I mean, if everything was captured perfectly in camera,
there would be no need for an editor.
Yeah, and I like to make our editors work. So I think that's really, what editing is for anyways. So it's interesting that you bring that up, the experience and the shared portion of that. And I feel like I should compliment you on the fact that when we do testimonials, usually you're sitting right next to me, and that's a comfortable place, obviously, for you and me, because we've done that for 15 years, 16 years together. But you allow it to be conversational. So you don't force a subject matter. Even as the CEO of the organization that we're telling a story for, you're not reaching in to extract something that's inauthentic or inorganic in the moment. And I find that rare. I find that most of the time that there's someone sitting next to me, they are going to force some kind of message out of the subject. And I think if you just let it be organic, and when you let it be organic, you get to go to these deeper places.
Well, I think it's not having an agenda, right? Because when you show up to somebody with an agenda, you're not going to get their true self. And so for me, if I'm coming to do an interview with a veteran and they know that I want them to say something great about Boot Campaign, right? Like, otherwise I would have asked them to come do an interview. So it's kind of like an unspoken truth. But at the same time, their story is their story. It's not my story. It's not Boot Campaign's story. It's their story of healing that we just happen to be integral to. And so it's, we don't own it. We were just a part of it. And so I think that that's, even the gentleman that we spoke to today, he had an experience with other veteran service organizations as well, at the same time as when he was with Boot Campaign. And I think that's why he had such a positive outcome, because there were other veteran service organizations that provided different care than we provide that helped him along. And he's a super proactive person. But I don't own him or his testimonial or his story or his healing. He owns that. And we're just a piece of it.
I think it's amazing that you can have that perspective, because I do think it is rare. Like, I feel like most people would maybe not even realize the unspoken truth of the matter. Like, of course, you're gonna say something great about Boot Campaign, and that piece will be there, and we'll extract that. But it's even like in how someone says it, like just allowing them to verbalize it in the way that they would verbalize it, and not have a particular thing in your head that you're aiming at the entire time. So it's really cool that you guys approach it that way.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, in my experience in commercial filmmaking in particular, not everyone approaches it that way.
Well, there's a line and a script and all these things that you want to happen that you're trying to control. I think the thing is, recently I was talking with somebody who I take yoga with, and he was sharing, he does a lot of energy work, and he was saying that one of the most beneficial pieces that he's had in his journey is learning to be less of a control freak and more of adopting an attitude of passive indifference, which I thought that those words were interesting to use, right? It's like how somebody shows up or how somebody is with you isn't necessarily because of you or because of what they want. It's more adopting this passive indifference that they can have whatever behavior that they want to have or they can have whatever experience they want to have, and you want to be involved in that. But if it's not ultimately what you end up wanting, then just letting it be, right? Adopting this passive indifference.
Yeah, kind of love that. Passive indifference. I definitely need to practice that more.
Yeah, we all need to practice that more.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes maybe I can be too much of a control freak.
Well, sure. You're talking to the first person who would label themselves as a control freak, for sure.
I know, I've experienced it.
It's hard to let go.
Oh, just kidding. If there is someone out there, if I'm a veteran and I'm kind of going through something, what is my step to take to reach out to Boot Campaign?
Yeah, if you're a veteran and you're struggling with service-connected brain injury or post-traumatic stress disorder, you can go to our website at bootcampaign.org. And on our health and wellness page, there's a button that says Get Help, and you'll fill out some basic information, and that really will get the ball rolling with our case management team, who'll be in touch and see that we're a good fit for you and that you're a good fit for us.
Yeah. How often is that inbox dinging? Like how many people are reaching out to you?
I would say a week, probably on average 7 to 10 a week. It depends, right? If we're doing some sort of national broadcast or something major happens from a digital campaign, then that number, of course, can go up. But I would say on average 7 to 10 a week.
Quite a large population, it sounds like, reaching out to you. And then in a year, roughly, how many are you able to serve?
Through both of our programs. So one thing that we haven't talked about is our other program that we do at Boot Campaign, which is Seasons of Service. And so through both programs, Health and Wellness and Seasons of Service, we impacted over 2,400 veteran and military family members last year. And so for us, again, individualized is the biggest word in our mission statement. It's individualized care for veterans struggling with service-connected brain injury, post-traumatic stress, chronic pain, self-medication, and insomnia, and then also those experiencing hardship because of their service or because of circumstances beyond their control.
And if you're someone who's looking to be like a corporate partner or something like that, what is it that Boot Campaign needs most today?
I think for us, the most important thing is to develop personalized and long-lasting relationships. Of course, any nonprofit survives on monetary donations. And so we always need more money to be able to execute our mission. But we also want to develop meaningful long-term partnerships. And so what that looks like and how that evolves over time is really up to two brands coming together to work to make a veteran's life improved. So.
Yeah, that sounds like many veterans' lives.
Yeah.
I mean, over 2,400 a year. That's great. That's amazing. How we met, I think, was such a huge part of my personal career and even my personal journey in a lot of ways. To tell those stories, those important stories that we got to tell together, it just meant a lot to me and really changed like how I view the world, how my career path went, all of those things. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you so much for
Thanks for having me.
coming on the show. Yeah, this is great. I mean, we've known each other for such a long time, and we've always been on the other side of the camera, so it was fun to do this on this side of the camera.
Thanks, Raj.
Our executive producers are myself and Jessica Kramer. Our producer is Giselle Saucedo. Our editor is Max Smith. Music by Creators. I'm your host, Roger Peters. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in.